Hello and welcome to X-Plane 11, at least for now. Later on we're going to be also in Flight Sim 2020. And the plan today is to do a VFR flight in the Bonanza in both sims and kind of try and show the two videos simultaneously, apart from the startup. The kind of startup stuff we'll do separately, and then the flight I'm going to try and do side by side. That is the plan. Whether it'll work out or not, we shall see. This is X-Plane 11. We're at Wick Airport. We're in the Carenado F33A Bonanza with the SimCoders Reality Expansion Pack. Let's have a look at the flight plan for today and little nav map. It's fairly simple VFR. This is the overall route. Take off from Wick, fly west, head up down the west coast of Hoy in Orkney, and then over to Stromness and into land at Kirkwall. So initially it's head to... I've got some VRPs on the route, so head to Loch Watton, which is VRP, and then Castledown Airdrome, which is disused World War II, and you can just kind of see the outline of the taxiways and runways. Round Dunnet Beach, up to Dunnet Head, see if we can see the lighthouse, round the coast of Hoy, see if we can see the Old Man of Hoy, which is this large sea stack, and Stromness and Kirkwall. That's the plan. Okay, as in terms of weather, what I've done is just said it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and the weather's clear. Now I did have a quick play with wind, adding like a wind layer, but it just seemed to work differently in both sims, so I've decided not to bother doing that. So let's see if we can get this aircraft started and ready to go. So we will turn on the parking brake, turn on the battery, beacon. Now all the levers are fully forward. I'm going to turn on the fuel pump for a bit and watch fuel flow gauge here until it peaks. Now let's just check we have got fuel selected. Make sure we've got enough. Let's go for about an hour and a half. Should be okay. More than enough. So on with the fuel pump, which is here, and watch the fuel flow gauge, which is up here. So that's peaked. Turn the pump off. Open the throttle a small amount, and hopefully the engine should start. Just check we're clear. Clear prop, beacon's on, handbrake's on. I'm going to go for a start. And I'm going to throttle back for about 1000 RPM. Let it settle for a second. Lean the mixture a bit here as we're sat on the ground. That's it. Altimeter wise it should be 1013, and that's the right sort of altitude. Let's just set this one as well. 125 feet airport elevation, so that's about right. We can turn on avionics, so we're not actually going to use it, but what I will do is I've got Kirkwall VOR tuned in 108.6, and we're not picking it up yet, but we should get it when we get up in the air. And I'm just gonna set the bearing pointer to the runway at Kirkwall, which is we're gonna land runway 09. So let's set it there to give us a reference point. Heading bug for now can go to 310, which is the runway we're going to use for taking off at Wick, runway 31. I think we're probably... alternator should go on. I think we're just about ready to taxi. Let's check trim here. Ooh, it's up to our RPM. I think I've knocked it down, sorry. Yeah, in terms of trim here, we want to be about 3 units up. For takeoff. It's well out there. Don't want any flaps, so that's fine. Fuel selector is on one of the tanks. Tanks are here and they're looking okay. I don't think we need anything else. Let's just set this to 2000 as a reminder that we're going to cruise about 2000. Oh no, something has... Thank you. That's better. Okay, anything else we need to do? Transponder. Let's get that on, oops, which we should have checked already, on standby, 7,000, that's fine. I think we're good to taxi. Let's just turn head tracking on. Okay, parking brake released. We're clear to taxi. Now, in X-plane, taxiing is a pleasure. Plane responds to the rudder to steer with the nose wheel, and it's brilliant. Not the same in Flight Sim 2020. And that windsock is doing something, which is interesting, because I thought we had 0 wind. Let's just have a look. Oh no, that's interesting. Okay, so we've got wind is 09010, gust 15, which is, I did set some wind before, but it didn't. Well, it worked in X-plane, but in Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 the plane was being thrown around too much. Let's just try and take away that wind. Let's delete this wind layer. Okay. Cool. Hopefully the windsock is not doing anything now. Well, we can tell. Yep, cam. Okay. It's a shame, because I would have quite liked to have had some wind, but it seems to behave so differently in the 2 different sims, and also I'm not quite sure how you set it for the upper and lower limits of the wind, so I'll just leave it out. So I'm going to come up here and hold and do our power checks. Okay, I think it's put a handbrake back on. Fine. Stop tracking for a second. Right, now then. Let's get up to 1700 RPM. Get the mixture rich. Let's do our magneto checks. Actually, the mixture wants to be slightly less than rich, because we lost some RPM there. It's left, right, it's about the same drop on both, to normal, and we'll also cycle the prop pitch. Ooh. Prop pitch made the sun change, interesting. Okay, back to 1000 RPM, make sure we're idling okay. Cylinder temperature, all looks good. Okay. Where's that EGT gone? Have we got this here? I thought we had EGT as well. Oh, it's over here, that's right, yeah, okay. Right. We're about to go on the runway, so strobes, landing lights, taxi light can come off, which I forgot to turn on anyway, and the transponder can go out. We've already checked flaps and trim, so I think we're good to go. Hello and welcome now to Flight Sim 2020. Again on the ground here at Wick, and this time we're in the G36 Bonanza. The airport itself is obviously rendered differently from the one in X-plane. The hangars, I mean, there are 2 World War II hangars here, and they've got the hangars, but they don't really look like that. The control tower here is completely missing. The airport building's a bit too high. There is a car park there, so I don't know what that is. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, although we do have some nice grass. Again, we should have the same sort of conditions. We've got clear skies, I've not put any wind in, and it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So let's jump inside. We've had a cockpit upgrade. We're now on a glass cockpit. Let's see if we can get started. So parking brake should be on. I'll turn on the batteries and I'll turn on the beacon. We'll cancel the warning for oil pressure and buses tie. Oh, I should say this is stock MSFS apart from 3 community mods. 1 to remove extra tall buildings, which is a temporary thing until they fix that in the next patch, because 193 introduced too many tall buildings. 1 for the G1000, which gives you nice things like extra engine monitoring pages, better fonts, the option to have the altimeter in hectopascals rather than inches, etc. So the G1000 mod and the G36 performance mods, and actually the version 0.5 of the G36 performance mods actually kind of needs the G1000 mod, so they kind of go together. So we've got those installed. Okay, where was I? Beacon. Beacon. Here we go. Beacon. Let's turn that on. And again, similarly, let's turn on the fuel pump for a bit, and we've got fuel flow gauge here on the G1000, so we'll just watch that. I think it jumped up. Let's turn it off again. Yeah, it did. It just jumped up instantly. Okay. Back to slightly open. There's a bit of a lag on the controls, which I don't like. We're clear. We have the parking brake on, so let's start the engine. We are running. Let's set the throttle for about 1000 RPM, and let's lean back for ground until we see the RPM drop a bit. There we go. Turn on the rest of the avionics. Again, we don't really need them, but well, let's turn on the alternators first. Avionics. We might as well do trim while we're here. Let's go for the same trim up. Oh, tooltips that you can't remove. Up 3 on the trim. Flaps are up, so that's okay. I'm just gonna kind of zoom. Oh no, we've got wind again. Has this done the same thing and left my wind layer in? Let's have a look, because otherwise why are we rocking? I don't think we have any wind layers. Is this a wind layer? Oh, is this a... yeah, okay. Maybe it's the same as X-Plane. Let's delete the layer. Okay, fine. Right, we don't have any wind. But we're still rocking a bit. But maybe we're just moving around or bouncing or something. Okay, where was I? Yes, altimeter. Now, I think we're 1013, but there's no little information window, so I'm just going to shift B. Yeah, that's fine. 013. We've checked the trim. Everything else is okay. Yes, the map. Let's just try and where's the zoom, the range button? Yeah, it's hard to get the right thing, especially with everything rocking like this. Another thing this G1000 lets you do is select aircraft heading orientation mode, which is good. So you've got these engine pages here now where you can get your individual cylinder temperatures for leaning and stuff like that. So okay, are we ready to taxi? Turn the taxi light on. Now the turning performance on this is horrendous. I'm gonna have to go left and just run the people over, because there's no way I'm gonna go right. I'll be on the grass. So let's release the parking brake. I got my foot flat on the left rudder pedal, and it's still going to cause some sort of propeller mayhem here. It just won't turn round. Oh well, we may have just avoided it. Again, we'll do our final checks at the threshold. Transponder, we might as well get that kind of going as well. It's on standby 7000 for now, so that's fine. I do have I don't have nav tuned in, so let's tune 108.6. Should have done this before taxiing. and we will want, let's just come to a stop here for a second, so we do our checks as well. Parking brake on, okay, good. So we will want DME, oh, we have DME already. That's another thing, this remembers, the G1000 now remembers your settings, so that's great. It says no wind data, I'm not sure why it's saying that, maybe it's because we're not using real weather. Okay, that's fine. So let's try and do the same sort of power checks that we did in X-Plane, so let's get that mixture forward a bit more. Let's get up to 1700, which is hard to tell because there's so much lag in moving the throttle that you've got to kind of wait for it to settle. That's probably as close as we're going to get. Okay. Left magneto. See, we only get a very slight drop, and it goes around to about, what, 1690, 1680? Same on the right magneto only. So I'm going to say they're fine. And we'll cycle the prop. Okay, that's good. Mixture back to rich. Back to 1000 RPM. Tanks, we've got fuel, we're here in the green, that's fine. We're on one of the tanks at the moment. Okay, back to 1000, that's fine. So now transponder can go out. Strobe can go on. Landing light can go on. Taxi light can go off. And I don't think we need pitot heat, so I think we're good to go for the runway. Again, turning around here is going to be very difficult with very limited nose wheel steering. Having to brake as well. Actually, it's not too bad. Okay, so right, let's slowly increase the power. So we are starting to move along the runway here. We've got FS 2020 on top, and we have X-Plane down below. F33 and X-Plane's the first to rotate there. I think I rotated them both when they reached about 75. The G36, which is in FS 2020, has a slightly more powerful engine, although I think it's a bit heavier, so I think the climb out rate's probably going to be about the same. But then when I get to cruise and I go to 20 inches manifold pressure, the G36 I think has a slight speed advantage. So what I've ended up having to do is the FS 2020 video above is slowed down very slightly. It's like 5% or something compared to the X-Plane one, just to keep everything in sync. But other than that, the performance of the two aircraft was very similar, and really this is down to the excellent work done by the G36 mod in FS 2020, because the stock plane performance is all wrong, but the mod corrects it really nicely. And I'd say, you know, in terms of the actual flying characteristics, the trimming, the speed, there's very little difference between the two aircraft. The sound at the moment here is actually a mixture of both. For the first part there, it was just the X-Plane sound, but now it should be both. Okay, so we've taken off and we're on track now for Loch Watton, which should be kind of in front of our nose or just to the left. You can just see it there in X-Plane, and you should be able to shortly see it in FS 2020 as well. You can see, I think that's Wick River there quite clearly in FS 2020, just because the water shows up as more of a blue colour, and also the fields show up slightly more clearly as well. And there's Loch Watton in the above plane as well. Now Loch Watton's quite a good landmark actually. If you look on any of the approach charts for runway 13, 1.13 at Wick, you'll find that you kind of end up following a sort of downwind leg that takes you out along to the right of Loch Watton, and when you reach the end of it you basically turn in for base. And so any of the procedures, that if you use a procedural approach, you'll find yourself going along past Loch Watton and then turning base. It's the largest loch in Caithness as well, and it's quite good for fishing. There's the village of Watton is just to the sort of this end of the loch on the left, and the main road from Wick to Thurso goes through the village. So I think you'll see the village coming up fairly soon. Yep, there's the village of Watton on the left. So Loch Watton's where we start our turn. I can certainly, so here I've levelled off here at 2,000 feet, just flying manually, trimming to stay level. 2,000 feet is a safe altitude for the whole flight, so that's why I picked it, and it's reasonably low so we can see things. I'm just starting the turn there now in FS 2020, and we're about to do the same in X-plane. And so basically I'm at 2,000 feet and at 20 inches manifold pressure and 2300 RPM in both aircraft. And I think, although I think they ended up both going at roughly the same speed. I think the F33's at 140 there. I can just about make out the analog dial. I think the G36 is roughly the same, or maybe slightly faster. So we're now on track for Castletown Airfield, which is a disused World War II airfield. It was kind of quite active at the same time as Wick was in use in the war. And I mean, just beyond Castletown, so about 11 o'clock there, you've got you've got Dunnet Bay, and then Dunnet Head is the kind of darker shaped headland sticking out. Above that, it's kind of more covered in heather, so it's a bit darker. Dunnet Bay also has Dunnet Beach, which is a very nice sandy beach. We'll see that in a minute when we get closer to it. And you can see that the kind of shadow cast by the sun is very similar in both planes here, and that happens a few times throughout the flight, so it's nice to see they both agree on that. Of course, both at the same sort of simulated local time here, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So in a minute we're going to be looking out of the front left of the plane, just to see what we can see on the ground of the disused airfield. We should be able to see outlines of the taxiways, and there are two runways, kind of triangle type layout, but I think there are 2 runways that you can see still, or the outlines of. Village of Castletown there, I should just say, on the left, just at one end of the bay there, on the left hand side as well. And there's a flagstone trail there. If you go to Castletown, you can walk that and say where the local flagstone industry used to be a base. Now there's the airfield on the ground. There's one of the runways there, and there's a taxiway just snaking around the outside, and down below an X-plane as well. You can see the taxiway, and then we're just about to, you can see a runway there, just sort of parallel with the wing there. So it's that is a VRP, visual reporting point for VFR, and it's visible in both. Now we're going to cut along, follow parallel with the Dunnet Beach and the sand dunes. They're quite extensively developed sand dunes there because of the way the wind blows in. You can see them quite clearly in both sims. There's Dunnet Forest, which has got a nice walk around it, and you can just see that you can see the trees there in FS 2020, and unfortunately I'm slightly on top of it in X-plane, but I think you get a peek of it in a minute. And it shows up quite clearly on both, and that's the road going past the sand dunes there, the main road. There we go, there's the trees. Now there's a caravan camping site there just on the left, and there's a little car park, and that's clearly visible in both sims. And the whole the beach is about, if you go from this end where the campsite is right back to Castletown, it's about 6k there and back if you walk or run it. now there's the village of Dunnet, and then we're going to head up along the east side of Dunnet Head. You know, there's a single track road that goes up to Dunnet Head, and again, in wartime, there used to be a wartime camp there. There was one of the radar type stations was on top of Dunnet Head. There used to be antennas up there, and there is actually a lighthouse, but the lighthouse is not depicted properly in either of the sims, as we shall see in a minute. But for now, if you have a look at the road and the little locks, they show again. I think the terrain here definitely shows up more clearly in FS 2020. It shows up quite nicely, actually. So look out now for the lighthouse. In FS 2020, there's some kind of alien structure on the side of the cliff, and these are really tall cliffs, by the way. They're huge. And then I think beyond that, there's like what looks like a little lighthouse tower way down at the bottom of the cliff. Whereas on X-Plane with Orbix, the lighthouse has just kind of been squished and flattened down onto the top of the cliff there, rather than being anything that stands up. So neither sim does a particularly great job there with the lighthouse. So yeah, and that was the most northerly point in mainland Britain, Dunnet Head, actually, further north than John O'Groats. So as we leave the most northern point of the mainland now, we are aiming for the west coast of the island of Hoy on Orkney. Famous for a few things. Famous for the Old Man of Hoy, which is a sea stack. Unfortunately, I don't want to spoil anything, but you won't really see it in either sim. It was climbed on TV by I think it was Chris Bonington. Was that back in the 60s or 70s? There was a wartime base on the island, and there's a museum there still, and yeah, Lioness, and there's a giant like oil container tank thing that's got stuff in it, and there's a museum building well worth going to visit. Also Hoy's the place where the Long Hope lifeboat had its home base, and that was lost. Was it again? Was that in the? That was in 1969, 17th of March. The lifeboat was lost, and the crew of 8 lost their lives, sadly, because of the waters around the Pentland Firth and the north coast can become very stormy, very dangerous, and they would go into a tank. I think it was a tanker in distress. Anyway, we're getting nearer the west coast of Hoy now. I'm going to forget the name of the bay now. There is a bay, and that's where you can kind of park and set off on the path if you want to walk along the top of the cliff to where the old man is, the sea stack. And then I'm doing a lot of looking around in FS 2020 in the top there, just to look at the sea textures, because they seem to have kind of gone downhill since the first release of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I'm sure you used to get more wave effects, and that seems to have died down a bit. I haven't changed my settings. I've kind of got high. I think I've still got high for the water or wave effects. I'm trying to remember the name of that bay now. It's really Ratquick Bay, that's it. So Ratquick Bay is kind of at the 1 o'clock position, and then you walk up from the bay as we're viewing it to the left there to go along the cliff about straight ahead of us, and then just round the corner there should be the sea stack. You can see the reflections of the cliffs in the water in both sims, very similarly lit. Again, the land features are clearer in FS 2020, but they're a bit too blue, I think. In fact, So one of the reasons I made this was that Orkney seemed to have a bit of an update recently, in that the gross errors that were there around the airport, where there were blue fields and obviously like terrain that was really badly characterised as to the land surface, and too many trees. I mean, that's mainly fixed. There are still too many trees, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was before. The really patchy fields have gone, although the whole thing is still a bit blue. So actually X-Plane may do a better job, I think, with the colours here. Or X-Plane Orbix, obviously. Should say that we are of course comparing an add-on scenery in X-Plane with the default scenery in FS 2020, but then everyone who flies around the UK in X-Plane just gets Orbix anyway, so it's kind of the standard thing to install or buy. I think the edges of the cliffs actually are possibly better in Orbix than they are in FS 2020. A bit sharper, whereas they can be a bit rounded. And I'm trying to find the C stack here, because it should be just there somewhere, but it isn't. It's not there. I think actually where it is actually visible in FS 2020, but it's just the kind of, in fact, yeah, it's that sticky out bit there. It should be there, I think, although it's flat. The stack's not there, but the base of it, the kind of platform it sits on, is there. I say both aircraft here, I mean, I'm not really touching them very much. I may be trimming occasionally. The trim is easier to maintain in X-Plane just because the actual trim control in an FS 2020 is a bit non-linear. Yeah, there's the same sort of base platform at the bottom of the cliff, but no stack. Which is interesting, because the stacks of Duncansby off the Caithness mainland are modelled in Orbix. They just, for some reason, didn't put the bigger and more famous stack in, but there you go. In fact, the edges of the cliffs there are fairly similar in both. Quite nicely done. So we are now going to sort of follow to the right here around the northwest tip of Hoy, and then we are going to head across to Stromness in Orkney. It's like the second main town after Kirkwall, and I think that's where the ferry from the mainland from Scrabster goes to. I think I'm right in saying that. Oh yeah, and George Mackay Brown was a famous Orkney writer and poet, was born and lived there, lived in Stromness. I'm just trying to check up on the ferry, so I think that's where it goes. Yeah, Northlink ferries. So that's Stromness ahead of us at 12 o'clock there in FS 2020, and I'll kind of just fly to the right of it so you get a chance to look out and see the town with its harbour, and certainly the sort of quays and the harbour itself, the terminals where the ferry docks is much better depicted in X-Plane. The harbour is pretty empty in FS 2020, although there is a ship in it, but just not the mooring points or the piers. And the houses and things and the roads here actually look more convincing in X-Plane as well, and the colours of the fields are definitely more convincing in X-Plane. It's far too vibrant green-blue there in FS 2020, but the whole of Orkney is like that, so it must be when I don't know if it was satellite or aircraft data for Bing was captured, but it was obviously some kind of strange lighting or something. But yeah, if you look here, you see the harbour there area is much better depicted. In fact, the whole town is much better in X-Plane with Orbix there. So now I'm essentially, I mean, Stromness puts you almost at the end. So we're going to land on runway 09 in Kirkwall, and Stromness is on the extended centre line essentially almost. So we're almost lined up already if we just head 90 degrees out. I've also tuned in both planes have the Kirkwall VOR tuned in. I'm not bothering with the ILS, just the VOR, and the needle is kind of coming in. I've set on a try heading of 90 on both, so I'm just letting the needle come in, and we'll soon be able to see the runway anyway. Still at 2,000 feet, I think, from what I can see. So I haven't started descending yet. So what I've got the DME readout available on both planes. In the G1000, I've got the DME turned on the PFD, and then in the F33 with the steam gauges, there's a DME readout below the heading HSI there. And because I'm at 2,000 feet, if you use the rule of 300 feet per nautical mile, that's about 7 miles out. 7 times 3 is 21. So at 7 miles out, we want to start to descend to put us on the proper glide. And the rate of descent, if you take your speed, we're going to be kind of targeting about 120 for our descent speed. So if you take the 0 off that, multiply by 5, that gives you 600. That's 600 feet per minute, which is a good sort of descent speed rate anyway for this sort of speed. So basically at 7 miles out, dear me, I'm going to start to descend about 600 feet per minute. And initially I think I just dropped the gear to start that process off. Now, can I see the runway ahead? Not quite with the view I've got at the moment, and we haven't started descending yet, so yeah, I mean the colours and the landscape here are much more true to life in X-Plane. And I can see the runway now ahead. I can see it just. Pretty much dead ahead. And it looks like I've started my descent. Yep, started the descent here. I think I've dropped the gear. Yeah, the gear's certainly down in X-Plane. I can't quite see the gear position then, the G36, but so we've got the runway ahead of us now in both. The PAPI lights are really useful in X-Plane here. I can see them quite a long way out, and essentially I think I end up with 2 reds, 2 whites pretty much most of the way on a nice stable descent. FS 2020, for some reason the PAPI lights don't show up, so I kind of have to eyeball the descent, and I don't do such a good job of it, so you'll see that I end up a little bit low at the end of the descent in the G36. So I think I've probably got 1 notch of flaps on here, at least 1 notch of flaps on at this point. It's probably slowing down to 120 or below now, and then when I get a little bit closer I'll go with the final notch of flaps. There's Kirkwall coming up there on the left, and unfortunately I forget to properly look at Kirkwall in FS 2020, but Kirkwall in X-Plane, and you can probably just see it there on the left now about 10 o'clock. There's a really nice rendition of St Magnus Cathedral with its red sandstone, and Orbix have included that as a landmark. Of course that's just not there at all in FS 2020 unless someone's custom added it. You can probably quite clearly see the runway now in both, and on the right of the runway in X-Plane you've got the PAPI lights, and they're missing in FS 2020. Also some kind of high-risey type farm buildings showing up, and just there's like sort of tall white buildings on the outskirts. They just don't exist. I mean, there are too many multi-story buildings in the FS 2020 Autogen that just aren't there. So it kind of spoils things a bit as well. So I think I'm probably, let's see, yeah, speed's down to, so I'm basically using an approach speed of 80 knots here in both. So I'm on final flaps now, I'm fully configured, gear down, final flaps, that landing light on hopefully. I forget to go and move the fuel selector, but it was a short flight, so we get away with leaving it on 1 tank. Bit too low in FS 2020 because of not having the lights. In X-Plane I think I've still got the 2 whites and 2 reds. And also I should have been checking in FS 2020, I should have been checking my height against distance, but I probably forgot to do that. So yeah, definitely too low. You can see that. I think I kind of just try and pitch up a little bit at the end there. And there's some, I mean, there are far too many trees still in FS 2020. I mean, trees in Orkney are pretty rare things, and there certainly aren't clumps of them around here like that. Again, there's some, you know, industrial looking buildings that I don't think they should be there. Oh, it may be part of that farm. Okay, final approach now. Yeah, you can see a much better approach angle in X-plane. And the scenery is way better in X-plane. And the airport buildings are much more accurate, as we shall see. So, a touchdown I think in X-plane first. Just trying to power back and then hold the nose up. And we're down, and now you can watch FS 2020. Don't watch me squirreling on the runway in X-plane. I don't know what went on there. I completely lost the ability to hold centre line and started oscillating all over the runway. And we're down in both now, and we're looking to come off. There's a taxiway at the right hand side here at the end, and again there's like forests of trees which shouldn't be there. And I have my trees on the not the normal high setting. I have it on one notch down. There's like an antenna there for NDB or VOR, which is just not there in FS 2020. And here's the taxiway. Now there should be a control tower along here on this taxiway on the left. I mean, then there's those runway signs. I don't think there are that many runway signs there. Yeah. There's the control tower, completely missing in FS 2020. I end up taxiing fairly fast along here. In theory I'm turning off my strobe, putting my transponder back to standby on both. But I say one thing is that, you know, both planes handled superbly, and that, as I say, that's really down to the G36 mod project for FS 2020, which seems to nail the performance figures. It just, you know, and yeah, the handling, the landing, everything is great. I have no complaints there. Going way too fast on this taxiway. Now, the terminal building in Orkney is definitely not 2 or 3 stories like the FS 2020. It's much more like the X-plane version. So we're just going to park up here around the main terminal. There is a car park there behind the terminal, so at least that's correct. So there we have it. 2 Bonanzas, one in X-plane, one in FS 2020. Just for fun, really, just to see. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm not sure if it was very useful, but it was quite fun to make. So thanks for watching, and hopefully see you again soon as we have a tanker there in FS 2020 doing donuts. Interesting. Just shutting the planes down now. Right, bye for now.